welcome to the channel. I'm Corey and I'm going to go over how to change the oil in your car. I'm going to give you a quick step-by-step tutorial from replacing the filter to draining the oil. So stick around and find out just exactly how easy it is to keep up with that very simple basic maintenance. Alright, now first things first, guys. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have this thing chalked in the back, and make sure that way it doesn't want to, roll off the ramp. And well, while you're under the truck, that's not exactly something you want a 5,800 pound SUV to do. So make sure the wheels are chalked. Safety is always number one. Second, make sure you're wearing something that you don't mind getting dirty. Changing your oil is very simple, but it's very dirty. So make sure you have an old shirt that you won't mind if it gets a little oil. Probably ruin it. So just make sure that you have that in mind. A lot of people don't realize exactly how simple it is to change the oil on your everyday car. It's the easiest thing you can possibly do to your car to make it last the longest. It's cheap to do, and again, it's very minor steps. I'm going to show you the tools to use, as well as the right filters, and I'll show you the oil that I use, but everybody's very opinionated about the right oil. But I'll show you my choice in oil. But anyways, I'm going to be working on my 2006 Ford Expedition Limited with the 5.4 Triton V8. And it's a big truck, but it's a very simple job on this truck. It's one of the simplest out there. And I'll show you the tools that I use, and then I'm going to show you also the difference between this and our RAV4. The RAV4 uses a different filter, and it's a whole different setup with the filter, and it takes a different style, some different tools. But again, it's very simple, very basic, and it's something. It's sort of like changing a tire. It's very good to know. It's so simple, and it'll save you money in the long run. And in my opinion, it's kind of fun. I like doing it. I like changing the oil. I still remember the time that my dad took me out into the barn and taught me how to change the oil in his Jeep. And it was just, I loved it. I'd go out there with him, and I'd go out there with him every time he changed the oil. And eventually, when I got old enough, he put me under the Jeep, and he walked me through what I needed to do the proper oil change. And ever since then, I've loved it. I've loved changing the oil on my own cars. Now, you want to make sure when you do change the oil that you get the oil temperature up a little bit by running the engine beforehand, and that way it'll thin the oil just enough that when you drain it, you'll get more out. Because if you do it with a cold engine, the oil is thicker, and therefore it won't run out, and you may not get as much possible oil out of the drain, or out of the drain pan as possible. All right, guys, pardon the squinting. I got the sun right in my eyes, and I can't find my sunglasses, so bear with me, okay? Right here is everything that I use to change the oil in these cars. It's very minimal tools. Again, it's very simple to do. This is the engine on my 5.4 Triton, again, it's very simple to do. Now, these 5.4 Tritons, it's very important that you do change the oil regularly on these engines, even more so than other engines, because they have what's called these engines have what's called cam phasers, and they are very finicky. You have to make sure that you keep up with the oil changes on these engines, or else these cam phasers can prematurely wear, and it's a very costly fix. It can cost, around $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. Because it's a timing issue eventually, for the most part. So you want to make sure that you change the oil in this regularly, and to avoid any unnecessary maintenance along the way. Now, here's the oil that I use. I just use high mileage synthetic. This SUV, this Ford, has 114,000 miles on it, and I just use 10W30 synthetic. You'll see on here that these engines actually say on the oil cap to use 5W20, but I just use 10W30, whatever. People are going to get, they're going to have their opinions about that, but whatever. This engine, the oil pan drain plug, uses a 17 millimeter socket to remove the drain plug. And then right here, I would recommend using the Motorcraft filter for this engine. Now, a lot of engines, you can use just about any filter. Again, people will have their opinions, but it is pretty highly recommended that you use Motorcraft. It is a Ford product, And you can get it anywhere. You can get it at any part store. You can get it at Walmart. So I would definitely recommend the Motorcraft if you're replacing a filter on a Ford. Now here's the proper socket for the filter on the Toyota RAV4. This is a 15/16 socket, and it actually utilizes a different tool entirely to replace or to remove the filter. And I'll show you why once we get to that car. And then right here is the filter that I use for the Ford, and I use this for my Jeep as well. Now there are a plethora of different designs out there for oil filters. This is a cheapie right here. There's actually one that I'd recommend from Craftsman. It's an automatically adjustable filter wrench, and you just place it right there on any size filter, and it'll automatically adjust to the right size. And you just unscrew, and it's a lot easier. These types of filters here are a little bit more difficult to get into tight spaces, and this Ford has a pretty tight space when it comes to the reaching the filter. So I would definitely, it's something I'll probably pick up. I definitely recommend one of those, over one of these little guys right here. They're not that expensive, and it'll save you a little frustration. And then of course you want to have a roll of paper towels handy. You know what I use paper towels for the most. We see when you drain the oil and you take out the drain plug from the oil pan under the engine, you do not want to get those threads dirty. The last thing you want to do is to put the thread the drain plug back into the oil pan with grime and grit and stuff like that on the threads, and then it won't seat properly. And then what will happen is it will eventually start to leak oil, and it may not be that much, it may not even be noticeable, but the last thing you want to do is leak oil if you don't need to. So if you don't actually have a problem. And it's another thing too that you want to think about is, if you do get an oil leak somewhere at some point in time, a legitimate oil leak, it's good to not have any unnecessary leaks, because that way you can pinpoint where the leak is coming from that's actually problematic. Because if you have too many leaks down there, then you won't know where to pinpoint, the actual leak. And so that's why too, when you're down there, it's a good idea to clean any oil that might drain and get on the oil pan and things like that. You want to go ahead and clean it with a rag to eliminate any traces of oil in case something like that were to happen. Then of course right here is the oil pan that I use. I just stick that under the drain pan. I stick it under the oil pan, and what you want to do is you have to count for a trajectory of oil, because when you do remove that drain plug, then you have to realize there's going to be in this truck there's about I think it's about 8 quart volume. So that's going to have, you're going to have pressure from 8 quarts pushing it right out the bottom, and it's going to push it kind of like a fountain. It's going to go a little distance. So you want to count for that trajectory, and don't stick it directly under, because it'll shoot over top the oil pan. So stick it a little further back, and then as the oil pan empties, the stream will slowly start to come in, and then you just kind of move it towards the stream, and just keep an eye on it so it doesn't get all over the ground. Ideally, you do want to change your oil in a garage, but right now my garage is sort of blocked by my camper, so I'm doing it outside, and it's a little windy, so you're gonna have to kind of catch it between wind gusts. I've had it before where I'll change the oil and the wind gust will come sweeping under my truck, and as it's coming out of the pan, and blow oil everywhere, and it's just a big mess. However, in that instance, you want to use some cat litter to clean up the oil. If you get oil on the ground, that's the ideal thing to do. Use cat litter. There's also, I believe it's called Floor Dry or something like that. It's a generic cat litter, basically. They specifically say it's to clean up messes and whatnot. So here's the difference between the two filters. You got the filter right here for the Ford. As you can see, it's already in its own casing. The filter here for the Toyota is not in a casing, because the casing is actually part of the Toyota itself. You have to unscrew that casing, and then right here it comes with gaskets that you have to put onto the new onto the factory casing. And something else you want to do with your filters when you put the new ones on. You see how they have those rubber gaskets right here? You got to make sure that you put some oil on there and make sure that way you lubricate it. That way they don't crack over time and dry rot. The oil will keep it moist and keep them from cracking and, you know, causing an oil leak. Now see that white thing right there? That is the old oil filter. And that is what you have to get up to remove with the filter wrench, or it might be able to be removed with your bare hands, because you don't want to tighten them too tight to begin with. You want to make sure that when you tighten them down, you hand tighten them, and then you turn them about another quarter to a half turn with the wrench. And so really, for the most part, you should be able to loosen it with your hand when you are you know, when you're taking the old one off. Another view from the different angle. Something else you want to do too while you're down here is just look around, make sure that there's no leaks. Look at the differential right here, make sure there's no leaks coming from the sealed area here. Check your oil pan right there, make sure there's no oil coming from that as well. And right here is your drain plug, and that is what you want to unscrew. That takes a 17mm wrench, and you just unscrew that, and then again it'll push all the oil out into your drain pan. And like I said, it's going to shoot out at an angle, so you want to make sure you account for the angle, for the trajectory as it you know, pushes out pretty hard. Now it should be loose enough to start turning with your hands. This one's not quite there yet. You see the oil is starting to come out, so there it goes, right into the pan. Remember what I said about making sure that you clean this oil pan when you put this drain plug back in, as well as the threads on the plug itself. That's something else you don't want to get too tight. Want to get it just nice and snug, and then call her quits with that. Alright, so now you just want to check your dipstick. It's not going to focus though. You want to check your dipstick, make sure, see how much is on there after you put so much oil in. Looks like you could use another quart or a quart and a half, so let's go ahead and do that. Now you don't want to put too much oil in, because that can be almost as detrimental detrimental to the engine as it can be if you run the engine with no oil. So you want to make sure you don't put too much in. Looking good, maybe just a hair more. And of course, always remember, you never ever want to start the engine until you put oil back in, and make sure that your drain plug is set and your oil filter is put back on. You start the engine without any oil in it, bad news. You're going to destroy your engine in a matter of seconds. So make sure you got oil in there. And now we're going to move on to the Toyota. I'm going to go ahead and just do the Toyota on my own, but I'll show you the filter and how it's set up when I get to that step. And see, here's the new filter right here for the Toyota. Comes with a gasket that goes along the inside of the housing. It has a smaller gasket here that goes, I'll have to look, I guess. I can't remember exactly where that goes, but it's obvious once you get it out. And this right here is a little nozzle that you use once you get that plate off. You know, using this right here. Once you get that plate off, you stick this and screw this up into the filter, and then what it does is it opens up a little, like a little valve, I guess you can call it, and then it drains the excess oil out of the filter. That way it's not too messy of a job. It's a little messy putting this in there, but once you get it in there and you get the pin under there, it's pretty simple. And then when it stops draining, you unscrew this, pull it out, and then you use this with your 5/16 socket and unscrew the filter housing, and then the filter, you'll pull the housing down, the filter will be in there, and I'll show you exactly how that looks. Right here is how it's different from the Ford. See how it's got a casing right here. That right there is actually part of the Toyota, and what you have to do to unscrew that casing is you just get a extension like this here with a 3/8 bit on it, and you just stick it in that hole right there and you turn. You want to be ready because it's going to drain some oil out, so you want to make sure that you're done using the drain pan for the oil pan, which it's doing right now. Probably going to be some oil in here that you want to watch out for. And you just, ooh, that was close. Almost got oil on my phone. Then you just dump. See, right here is the housing that the filter will go into. You know, most cars, you know, especially like my Ford, the filter is already in a casing, so it doesn't need something like this. And of course, it's a good idea to wash it, not wash it, to wash, or not, to clean the threads with a paper towel. Make sure there's no grime. Dump it all out in your drain pan. As you can see here, that orange rubber gasket, that's what we'll be putting the new one on there. And then there's also a gasket for the small plate that we had to unscrew. Right there's the gasket there. So we're putting a new gasket on that, and you want to clean that as well. And of course, you just reverse the process, put everything back together, and you are done. Good to go. You've got oil changed in 2 cars. Simple as that, guys. Now, on some cars, you're going to have to reset the maintenance light when you change your oil. And on the Toyota, that's one of the engines you have to do that, because after so long, after so many miles, you'll get a maintenance light, you know, telling, you know, reminding you have to go ahead and change the oil. So the way you do that is you open up your manual, and on the Toyota, you go to page 355. And there are 2 ways to do it. One of them is if you have a smart key. One of them is if you just have a standard key, you know, that with a standard ignition. Mine has a smart key on it. So I have to follow that procedure, and what that procedure says is turn the engine start-stop switch off with the trip meter A reading shown. So go ahead, we'll start, let's see here. I always forget when I do this how I'm supposed to do it. So turn the engine start-stop switch off with the trip meter. All right, so I got to go ahead. All right, see right there. I have to go ahead and make sure that's on A, which it's on A, it looks like. Alright, so now I gotta go ahead and shut the engine, or shut it down. Okay, so now that it's off, while pressing the trip meter reset button, turn the engine start-stop switch to ignition on mode. Okay. So you're gonna want to hold this button right here, and then turn that on to ignition on. Now I believe, let's see here, then while pressing the start, blah blah blah, press and hold the button until it says 00, which it did. It said 00, so now if we start the engine, the maintenance light should be off. Yep, sure enough, it is. Just have the low pressure gauge light on the tire, which that's not because I actually have a low tire. It's simply because one of our pressure valve readers is bad, but that happens. Anyways, that's it. That's how you reset the maintenance light on a Toyota RAV4 with a smart key. Well guys, that is how you change the oil in your car. Very simple, and it saves a lot of headache down the road. It's just a great thing to be able to do to your own car. It saves a few bucks. I highly recommend learning how to do it yourself. You know, and it's nice to know a little bit about your own car, isn't it? So I would definitely recommend, you know, getting under there, getting dirty, and doing your own oil changes. I hope this video helped if you decide to do that. If it did, like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys later. And check out my blog, FamilyManCarReviews.com. I've got blogs on there about different cars and whatnot that I reviewed and will review in the future. And I will put this in there as well. So guys, you take it easy, be safe, and we'll talk at you later.